in the airport terminal. Guy comes up and says, "I'm gonna have to disagree with you," and then he said it with a grin on his face. So it was a little more playful.
Yeah.
He's like, "Hebrews is not about Jesus."
Whoa.
I was like, "Okay,
You just preached the whole sermon.
Yeah, I basically said, "I'm just going to forget you said that, and I'm going to quote 4 verses." Now, this guy obviously believed in Jesus. He obviously believes the Bible's about Jesus. But in his mind, wherever he was listening and going to church, he just didn't agree with that statement.
Yeah.
You know, and so he basically, after talking to him a bit, he just believed it was about, coming out of apostasy from the Old Testament. And I was like, yeah, but there is a lot about that in there. But the point was, and I said, I'm going to give you 4 verses. And I had my Bible there, but I didn't pick up my Bible. And I was like, I don't need the Bible to know where these 4 verses are in Hebrews. I'm gonna quote them to you. Hebrews 1, 3, and 4. In these last days, God has spoken to us through his son. Yep. I said, who is that? And he said, Jesus. I said, okay. It starts off saying,
you're off and running.
In the past. Yeah. And I said, then it gives the credentials of said son, which are really, really good. He's the radiance of God's glory.
Exact representation
of his being. I said, then you have Hebrews 3 and verse 1. It says, let us fix our thoughts on Jesus. So I said, if we're keeping score, we are to listen to Jesus, because that's how God has spoken, Hebrews 1:3. We are to think about Jesus. Yep. Let us fix our thoughts on Jesus. I said, then
I know where you're going next.
Hebrews 12, 1 and 2. Let us fix our eyes on Jesus. I said, and then Hebrews 13 and verse 12. And so Jesus suffered outside the city gate to make the people holy. We had a little discussion about that. Through his own blood. Let us then go to him. Who's him? Jesus. Bearing the disgrace he bore. It's about Jesus.
Yep. Yeah. He's probably thinking of that Hebrews 6 passage and the Hebrews 10:26 that, I mean, there is some stuff in there about apostasy, but it's, yeah, I mean, I think the grander picture there is that Jesus is superior in the center point of the entire, like, all of it. He's a better temple, a better sacrifice, a better priest. I mean, he's the center point, and I think that the falling away part, or whatever there's disagreement on that, by the way, of course, in a lot of different theologies, but I think even the more Reformed guys, like I took a class with Tom Schreiner, he even said that, like, no, the book of Hebrews is a warning to not fall away, but fall away from what?
Yeah,
fall away from who?
I'd say that's to fall back under the old system. I mean, to me, it's very simple. Why the Hebrew writer was writing it? He was like, because somehow you can hold on to things that Jesus came and fulfilled. Why would you want to do that?
This is why we're so splintered in churches and denominations. Right. When you miss the point of the Bible itself. I mean, I just made that comment about the letter to Hebrews, but when you miss that, you start going down avenues and creating, like, whatever that phrase was that Zach said on the first argument. I don't know. It started with an M.
Modalism.
Let me tell you, I'm not worried about modalism, because somebody created that and said, hey, this is a thing. And I just don't care if I ever know what that thing is.
Well, you may not know that word. You may not know what the word means.
But that's my point. We tend to categorize everything, and say,
it's just a way of, the reason why you do that, though, is it's a way to reduce a bigger conversation into one word. And so, like, we could get into a whole definition of what's wrong with seeing God as just one person, but there's been councils that met on this, and so this is not biblical.
Most of the people that we're dealing with, they deal with modeloism.
Yeah,
that's a whole different
excellent
thing.
point. But you just made my point. The reason I refuse to categorize things like, eschatology, which I've learned on this podcast. That's when we're going to talk about the end times and the resurrection. The reason I stay away from that is what you just said, though. If I'm going to reduce down something to one word, it's going to be Jesus, who is a person, because God is not a theory. So, because people come up with these phrases and then they give their theories on what they think. And I'm just not interested in that. I like to look at all things related in the Bible in reflection of that God is a person, not a theory. And he revealed himself through Jesus, and it's convicted through the Holy Spirit. Period, exclamation point.
Zach?
I'm not a category guy, so I'm just not going to do it.
He said period, exclamation point. I guess, that means that he's not, he's not listening after this.
I like to make fun of those categories because I just think it's
Zach, do you want to put a comma in there and start over?
I think these categories are things that people want, that smart people, and I mean smart as in they're educationally smart, have studied, and it makes it easier for them to argue.
Right.
But to me, it confuses the common man.
It does. It does, Jase, but there are some things that we have to preserve the truth of, and who God is in his inner life, in his nature of being Father, Son, and Spirit, not in different modes, modalism, meaning that God manifests in one mode, then another mode, then another mode. That is detrimental to how you're going to see God and yourself, and it changes, in my opinion, I think it changes the entire scope of Christianity. So that is one thing that I would say we can't.
I would agree. I would just disagree that I have to use the word modalism. That's all I'm saying.
I will agree with you on that. You do not have to use that word.
I don't like these.
Period, exclamation point.
We have found détente.
Because I never made my point, because it says that, the God chose the foolish things of the world and you remember that text, to shame the wise. Where's the scholar? Remember that whole phraseology? Where's that in? 1 Corinthians
1.
Yeah. So, these men, Acts 4, they were ordinary, unschooled men, and their declaration was they had a reputation for what? They had been with Jesus.
That's
just what I want to be.
Yes, that trumps everything. I agree, Jace. I do think that. And I go into that side of it a lot, like the more academic, and I read a lot. And when I get in my basement on that, what happens is it does become just an intellectual. It can quickly become that. And it's not to say that I should never study deep, but it is to say that it's not simply about me gaining the right information. The most important thing is, have I been with Jesus, and do I smell like him? That is the most important thing. And so I receive your point there.